Hello, and thank you for joining me on this video on speaking for understanding. Yes, so we've done listening for understanding, and I would totally recommend you listen to that first because the order of kind of skills is to listen first, right? That old adage, I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, okay? So you listen twice as much as you speak. And frankly, it's much easier to speak well if we've heard and understood what's going on for the other person, right? And in fact, it creates kind of an openness in them. If they feel heard and understood, they are much more likely to be willing to hear you. And simply because that story and their kind of is out of their head, and now they're like, oh, he understands me, but he doesn't agree with me, so maybe I need to figure out what's going on there, right? So you can spark a little bit of curiosity. And so speaking for understanding is the fact that we actually do need to be able to be understood ourselves, right? So it's not just about walking around understanding everybody else. We do need to have the world understand us as well. And that's part of getting what we want in a good way. It's part of how we engage the world so that we have space for us in it. And this is the skill for this. Perhaps you've heard of it referred to as assertiveness speaking, or influential speaking, or those sorts of things. So this is essentially how to influence others while speaking or while sharing information about yourself. And so it's really important for us to be able to do this and kind of get what's inside out so that I know what to do. And so we're going to kind of walk through the steps, and it's a little bit like the listening piece, except of course it's going the other way. And if you remember from the how does interpersonal communication work, there's this encoding piece, right? This place where we actually put together in our minds what we're going to communicate. And so really that's kind of the first stage, which is preparation. Now obviously there are going to be things that we want to share that are more important than others. Right? If we're expected to speak in front of a group, or share with a circle, or present to the boss or whatever, we're going to do a lot more preparation than if we're just chatting about the latest hockey game with our buddies, right? And so the preparation will, of course, depend on the importance of what you're trying to be understood in. And what happens here is this is kind of the beginning of the encoding piece. Is we need to know what we want to say, right? We need to know what it is that we want to communicate, and that can actually be quite hard, right? So this is a non-trivial step, the preparation phase, right? If we're going to talk to our spouse or our boss or our kids about something really important, we need to actually have a sense of what it is that we need to say and what it is that's alive for us. And that's a really, really important piece. If you don't know what you're going to say, then probably not the time to try to talk, right? It's just really critical to be able to pull together what you're going to say. And then you need to be able to know what medium you're going to say it in, right? Are you going to text it to somebody? Are you going to send an email? Are you going to pick up the phone? Are you going to do a video conference? Are you going to arrange a face-to-face? What is the best way to communicate this, right? And there's some really critical pieces here if you think about it. What is best communicated by text? Well, probably not complicated ideas, right? It's a short kind of little blip of information, and really there's not a lot of context there, right? And so you need to be very careful about using text for communicating negative things, right? Negative messages over text tend to not go well. And so if it's a negative message, or a correctional message, or an I'm hurt message, probably not best to do that in a medium that is so limited in terms of how it can be received and how it can be responded to. Email might be slightly better, but not really, because again, if you're communicating something hard that way, You don't know when they're opening that email. You don't know what's going on for them. You don't know what they're thinking after they read it, right? Until they respond or don't, and maybe they don't respond, and now what do you do, right? So what you're communicating, it matters, right? If you're communicating when a meeting is, can you please pick up some eggs or something, maybe one of these kind of more shallow mediums is okay, right? Because there's no deep message going on here. You may have received emails in the past that you're going, wow, that probably shouldn't have pressed send on that one. Or where we've, pressed send and gone, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, like an hour later, right? Oh, that was a mistake. I wish there was a pullback on that. Well, that just simply says you haven't done, or they haven't done kind of that preparation around what they want to say and what the medium is, right? So, when we're thinking about that, we're thinking about, just kind of timing stuff, right? So when I am angry with somebody and I'm kind of like they sent an email and I react to it, like I'm feeling things about it, I will write an email in response, not putting their name in the to line, right? So it's not a reply. It's writing a fresh email. Nobody's in the to line, so I can't accidentally send it. Key point. And I then just let it sit for a day. Right, and then I go back to it the next day and I read it and I go, yeah, glad I didn't send that. And either ditch it, discard it, or rewrite it, right? Depending on kind of what's necessary. And so if I decide, yeah, an email response is good, but I need to take out all the anger and frustration and, put some relationship padding around the words and all that kind of stuff, then that's okay, right? But we lose control over timing when we send an email. We don't know when they're opening it, right? We don't know what kind of mood they're in. We don't know what the space is, right? And so timing, the more important the communication is, the more we need to think about this medium and timing piece, because that's really critical. The second stage in any communication is to create openness. Now, when we were talking about listening for understanding, the kind of the central piece was we need to be curious, right? We need to have this curiosity. And we can do that for ourselves. We can say, I'm going to be curious. But for other people, we need to kind of help them a little bit sometimes, right? We need to try to set the stage for success. And one of the ways that we do that is we create openness. And it's basically trying to do with them what works for us, right? We're trying to create this experience of quiet, which is very kind of important to being able to be curious, to be able to kind of listen. So we need to, work on their body quietness, right? So, don't ask them after a long day, or don't have the conversation, right when they wake up, because maybe they're not a good morning person. Or right after they get home from work, because maybe they had a stressful day, right? So we need to kind of work on the body thing. So maybe it's after dinner, after the kids are in bed, or maybe it's when you go for a walk or whatever, right? So try to quiet the body. And that's just about timing and about kind of preparedness. And we want to be able to kind of quiet their mind. So this is that listening piece, right? What's going on for you right now? How are you feeling? Are you kind of ready to hear something from me? When can I book a time for me to share kind of what's going on for me, right? Creating that space in their mind for this conversation, saying, instead of, just surprising them as you go to bed, oh, by the way, I have this huge conversation to have. You say, hey, when would it be good to have this time to talk? Because I want to share something important with you, right? So then they're going to do whatever they can to get ready for that conversation, right? That they've got the opportunity to prepare. And then, of course, there is this quiet space, right? So don't do it while the kids are running around. Don't do it while, in a noisy cafe, right? Maybe if it's going to be an intense conversation, book a time where it can be private and you can have a good chat, right? And some people, this creating openness piece happens structurally. Every week they have a family business meeting, where they talk things through. Or a couple's, a mom and dad kind of business meeting where they figure stuff out, and everybody kind of shows up ready for that because you've created the space. Creating the openness for it means that they are going to be able to hear you when you speak, right? Which is a really important part of it. And if you remember from listening to understand, we talk about these three things, right? Facts, right? What's mutually agreed upon. Opinions, those things where there's disagreement or actually it's a genuine opinion, like that was the best day ever. And then of course your emotions about those things, right? So this is a little bit like spoon feeding, right? Most people don't have any listening training. They don't think about what they're doing when they're listening. And so we need to almost spoon feed them. This is what this is where I think we're on the same page. This is where I think we're not on the same page. And this is how I feel about that, right? So this is all about I, right? This is an I statement. Right? So you're not saying you this, you that, you the other thing. This is I feel when you, right? Could you do something different, right? This is what you do, this is what it's like for me, and this is how I feel when it happens, right? So this speaking is about responsibility for yourself, and of course asking for the other person to be responsible for themselves as well, right? So these are conversations where you're allowed to say something hard, right? That, when you do that, I actually don't feel love, right? Or when you do that, I actually feel like you don't respect me, or whatever it might be. When you speak, you need to kind of be clear about these things. This isn't about making for a perfectly comfortable, rainbow-filled, beautiful conversation. No, these can actually be very difficult conversations, which is why it's worth preparing for them, right? We don't want to muddy the water with a bunch of you are a bad person, you hate me, right? All of that stuff muddies what's going on because now they're getting defensive, now they're shutting down. So we want to actually have them be able to be understanding us, right? That's where the influence comes from. It doesn't come from pushing your agenda on them. Our influence comes by them being open to changing the way they see the world and the way they see us and their own behavior, so that they can entertain the idea that maybe they could do it differently, or maybe we could do something differently next time, right? Or just have the conversation. And so it's super important to be able to do this in a way that maintains the openness, right? You don't want to do all this work and then shut them down because you're shaming them, blaming them, and generally, kind of creating these unpleasant experiences. And then you go back to listening, right? You want to know if they got it. You want to know if they heard you. You want to know if they understood. And so because, again, most people don't know to kind of say, okay, so this is what I heard, this is how you feel about this thing and that thing, and this is what we agree on, and this is maybe where we're different. Most people can't do that, and so even though you've spoon-fed it to them, they may still not hear you yet, right? They may not have been as open as they needed to be. You may not have said it in a way that they could understand. So now this is kind of a try to see if they've heard you, and if they don't, then you get to clarify, right? Understanding other people is hard, and so we don't assume that other people are going to be able to do it. And so we don't need to get angry when they don't, right? Even though we've done all this work to help them get to a point where they can understand us, it may be hard work for them. It may be a new experience for them. It may be something that's hard for them. And so then we get to simply kind of find a different way to say it, right? We can clarify and reframe, right? So maybe we say, okay, they didn't hear me say it that way. Maybe I need to say it a different way. But don't get derailed, right? Don't get stuck in their story. Stay in yours and say, okay, I don't think you've understood what I'm trying to communicate here yet. Can I please try again? And so then what we get to do is we get to walk through this again, right? Which is why it's super important that we need to know what we want to say, because if we don't, then how do we know if they've heard us? Right? How do we know if they've heard of us if we don't know what we wanted to say? Interesting point. When we speak, sometimes we get clear ourselves, right? So we may actually be heard and then realize, oh wait, actually that's not quite the thing, right? Maybe they did hear us and we need to go, okay, right, when I first thought about this, I thought that that was what I thought, but now I think something different because of something called verbal processing. And that's the power of being able to speak, right? Some people are very good and natural at this. Some of us need to work on it. Personally, I'm an introvert. Doing this is hard for me. I have to, and I still do have to work hard at making sure that I put my perspective out there because I process inside my own head, right? But the power of this is actually something called verbal processing. Is as we go through this process, not only do they get a better understanding of what's going on, I do too. Because somebody else is shedding their light on it. They're asking questions. They're saying, have you thought of it this way? Right? And they're like, oh, I didn't mean that. And now so we're starting to shift our own story as a result of this. So this isn't about being positional. This is about understanding, right? Understanding so that they know what's going on for us, but also so that we grow in our own understanding. So this is super important. This is about assertiveness. This is about getting what we want in the world, but in a good way, right? This is a power with thing. You can see how much work is being done to make sure that they're coming with us, that we're not dragging them or pushing them. They're coming alongside because that's what we want, because that's where this lives. So again, we're going to pause here, take a look at this, think about something that matters to you right now that you're struggling to say, and try this process with it. Right? Maybe you're you've struggled telling your spouse how you love them. Right? Well, work on it this way. Maybe you've struggled to ask for change. Look at it this way. Maybe you want to raise at work. I don't know. This is the process to follow so that you have the highest likelihood of getting what you want in a good way. Thanks for watching.